Welcome back to Taking a Move. My name's Neil and this is the winter turn of 1914 in the game called The Lamps Are Going Out, strategic scale World War I simulation stroke game. This video is the second in a series of videos that plays through the game, aiming to show how the rules evolve over time and how the game state evolves into something quite a bit different by the time you reach the later stages of the game compared to what it is at the beginning, which is where we are now. The video will really be just a quick playthrough of each turn. If there's anything I do that's not quite right, just put it in the comments and so on. The new feature for this turn is the introduction of the war in Turkey and the Middle East, and we will need to set up that region. We'll do that using the card here, the setup card, and it's worth noting that anything that sets up with a red marker is automatically on its spent side. The other thing that's worth noting is this is the only faction that comes into the game automatically at a certain point. All the other factions come in through some form of card play and an event card being drawn at certain points in the game. Okay, so let's set it up. And basically everywhere in Turkey, apart from Gallipoli, has spent units. And we also are lucky enough to have an extra unit in the Caucasus for the Russians, and also a couple of extra units for the British as well down there in the Middle East. So the British have these two units, which hopefully you can see that is the MEF and the IEF, and they are the only units that start, the British units that start the game in this region, and they cannot voluntarily leave. They have to be beaten and forced to retreat from the region, and that's one of a few different special rules that we have. Just double check which army goes where on here. So the second goes there in Anatolia, the third in Erzurum, and the fourth in Damascus. Okay, so some of the special rules in this track are you can only have one unit at a time in any of these square boxes, and a maximum of one trench as well. When you refit, that's absolutely fine for this track and this track into Russia, but the one that sort of starts in Basra has an increased production cost for any army other than Turkey, and the increased production cost, it would be 2 to refit a unit on that track. There are also some special rules around Gallipoli and the invasion of Gallipoli, which I think I alluded to last time, with beachheads and so on, and invasions, but we won't worry about that until we get to it, if we get to it at all. Anything else? Yeah, the other thing to bear in mind is Turkey have a special movement rule, which basically means that they can always move one unit. So for example, if it's the Central Allies' turn and you move two Austro-Hungarian Empire units, you can still move a single Turkish unit. You could move 2 Turkish units, but if you were to do that, you would not then get the benefit of the automatic move that you would have as Turkey. Anything else? I think that's pretty much it for now, so we can jump straight in. It is 1914 still, it's winter, so we don't need to do the event deck reshuffle that we would have to do in the spring turn of 1915, which is going to be in the next video. So all we need to do is jump straight into Germany and just get going. Okay, so the event card that we've drawn is one called First Line Formations, applicable in 1914 and 15. And basically you place a marker on a German army and have a +2 DRM in combat, or you get to deploy one trench for free, even in 1914. Now, you're not normally allowed to build trenches in 1914, but this card will allow us to do that. And I'm sat here wondering whether or not that is actually a good idea, because at the end of the last turn, or the board state in this turn is such that there's been a couple of nations conquered, so Belgium and Serbia were both conquered. Not so great for the triple entente and Eastern allies. However, Russia did come in and take Prussia, which reduces German production. There is additional production here in Posen. Now that is 3 production points. And it's not going to take much for the Russians to come in and really kept good headway towards Berlin, which would mean an early end of the game if they were successful in taking Berlin. So, question is, do we divert resources from the Western Front, or do we hope for the best over on the Eastern Front and try to use the Austro-Hungarians as a buffer? So I think what I'll do in this circumstance with this card, rather than using the DRM marker, I will actually deploy a trench for free, because the marker has to be removed at the end of 1915 anyway. So let's put that trench into Posen, which will give it that region a bit of a defensive barrier against the Russians. Okay, so straight on into movement. Now, when you move our armies and artillery, now we do have quite a lot of armies here. A little bit cautious of moving too far away from the Western Front, because there's a nice line down here towards Paris for the Germans, and Paris is a victory area. So I don't think I will move anyone particularly at this point. We don't have any artillery as the Germans at this point. The next thing we need to think about at this stage, because we don't have too much tech involved, is move the fleets. One of our fleets is spent and the other is not, meaning we probably stand a poor chance of beating the British Navy in the blockade battle. So we won't do that. And the only other thing to think about is warfare for the submarines, and I think I will move them to unrestricted warfare, because that will hopefully reduce the British production a little bit more than would happen in the Hague Convention box. Moving on to combat. First thing we do would normally be naval combat. No naval combat, so we come into guerrilla combat down here, if you can see it, just about in the Eastern African track. We cannot refit Germany, the German East African unit there, but we can still do guerrilla attacks. So we'll roll a die and hope for a 5 or 6. We've got a 4. That's a bit sucky. So no damage to the British. Don't have to worry about being spent or not in guerrilla combat for that unit only. So on to ground combat in other areas. There is no ground combat in the Eastern Front at this point, because both units are spent. So let's think about attacking into the Somme from Belgium. Now the Brits do have at the start of the artillery tech tree, or quite a good start as well, with the counter battery card, which is this one they drew last turn, meaning that the artillery there can defend with 2 dice as well as attack with 2 dice. So let's have a think about whether we want to risk that with our army as Germany. And frankly, I think we do, because we're quite well stocked with soldiers at this point. So we've got 5 units. We'll put the battle location on the border there, and these 3 will come down as the defenders. Start off fighting against the Brits. Well, the defender would normally get to choose, but seeing as I'm the defender and the attacker, we'll start against the Brits. So Germans rolling as the attacker, rolled a 6. Couldn't get much better at this stage. And we have a 3 for the Brits. Okay, so that is a good success. Bring the big push marker on, because we've had a success there. Roll again for the Germans. That's a 3 plus 1 brings that to a 4. And we will now, I think, as France, use that Western artillery counter and the counter battery to try to roll hopefully a 5 plus. And we've rolled a 6. That's fantastic. So we have stopped that German attack. The big push marker goes away. Next unit there for the Germans. It's a 6. And for the French, we have a 1. That's a terrible result. We may as well keep going as the Germans. It's a 4. versus a 4. Yep, the French have to retreat. Well, they don't have to retreat. They could do that. What's the word? From Lord of the Rings. They shall not pass. And roll off against eliminated units, hoping for a 2+ on the modified die roll to prevent any kind of German advance. But obviously we have a finite number of units, so I think in this case we will retreat back into Paris. The artillery does come with us in this case, and the German units will, the one that attacked will have to come as always, and then there could be at least as many as we feel like are coming forward as well. So let's bring forward, I might as well bring forward them all, right? There we go. Must put a Central Powers control marker onto Belgium to show that it is controlled by the Central Powers. That's important for things like supply when you refit and things. Okay, so we have one more attack potentially, this time into Paris, and we will do that. It's a 5, no modifier because it's a new area we're attacking from, and a 1. These guys have to retreat again, but this time we will eliminate that French unit and hope for a 2+. And the way we do that is we modify the die roll by the number of units already eliminated. So this will be the second unit eliminated. So it's going to be a die roll of what's that? Hopefully we'll get a 4. Yeah, it'll have to be a 4, won't it? And it's a 5. Okay, that's very cool. That's modified down to 2, meaning that unit's removed, but we do not have to cede ground in Paris. Okay, cool. But the French are not doing so good in terms of their war at the moment. Right. Okay. Germany now needs to think about whether they want to attack here from the Rhine into Verdun. I don't think they will, because ideally what we'll have is enough production points left over to shore up this area with some new troops. So we'll pause there. No more combat in this turn. So let's check the blockade box as we move into the production phase. Nothing to think about there. No events to consider. U-boat attrition. 2 dice and check the table for each fresh U-boat. We've got an 11, which is no effect. And the second is a 5, which is spent, meaning that's flipped. So when we come to attack the British on their turn, there'll only be 1 U-boat that attacks because of the attrition there. And we now just move to refit, raise units, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so the Germans would normally have 12 production points, -1 for there, so we've got 11 points. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in total spent there. And then we will have, I think we should probably build some new units rather than refit anything else. So we've got 7 spent, 8, 9, 10, 11 to build 2 fresh units, and those units will need to be built. Well, let me rephrase. The units come on spent if you want to pay 1 production point for them, but it's 2 production points to bring them on fresh. And I do want to bring them on fresh. 1 there into Britain, and the other one down here into the Rhine. Okay, cool. Everything's spent. We don't have any production left to transfer, therefore we just research technology and then do the dogfight. Okay, we have an A3, which is the Sostropen unit, and this is the highest artillery tree card we could get. We don't have A1 or or A2, and the opponent doesn't have A3 either, meaning this card just gets shuffled back into the deck, and we don't get any technological advances in this turn. With that, we now think about dogfights, and as I mentioned in the last video, we would normally roll dice, have like a dice off based on the number of cards we have, but the Germans are the only ones with cards, so they would automatically win, and I take that to mean we can automatically just replace this unit here if we can do this dogfight counter, and I think I will. I think I'll move it into the Somme to try and stop any French counterattack into the Somme. Okay, reset artillery, don't have any, so now we move on to the Western Allies. And the Western Allies are in a pretty terrible position actually, because they have lost ground in the Somme. There's hardly anybody left in Paris, and there is issues to think about in Turkey now, as well as in East Africa. But the biggest concern at this point is, without a shadow of a doubt, the vulnerability of Paris. So we'll go to the event deck, and the card we've brought is the Old Contemptibles, which means we place a card, a token, on the first British Army, and they get to re-roll defensive dice once, removing the marker at the end of 1915 if it's not used. So that will just sit, if I can find it, that will just sit on this unit here, and I'll keep the card to one side just as a reminder that that's what I have to do with that. And that card's only valid up until the end of 1915. It's just a somewhat more experienced unit, I guess. Okay, so that's the event card, nothing else to do there. Now movement, and I will move a couple of French units back from Verdun into Paris. Now this is an interesting question here, because we have very little production. We've got 2 production points for the French, 3 production points for the French, plus that, which is 4 and 5. The Brits have a varying number depending on how, basically depending on how much the submarines impact them. Okay, so let us, doesn't seem worth it to counterattack the Germans at this point. I think we need to make sure we've got units in there as a defence. So I won't do any attacking on the Western Front, but I will do some down here in the British East Africa. So this is just a standard combat. It's a 5 for the Brits and a 2 for the German unit there, meaning they have to retreat and the Brits come forward and are spent. Middle Eastern track. Now I kind of want to show you how this works. It's very similar. You just do attack against the imaginary garrisons in these areas. But I'm conscious that if I do that, I'm going to be wasting production to refit them. Or I risk them being attacked by the Central Allies in a few turns. But let's show you how it works. So basically we're attacking an area with no units there, but it's controlled. So we'll roll a dice, and in the absence of anything to change it, there is a +2 that we have to beat to conquer Jerusalem from the Sinai. So let's roll the dice for a 5, so we move into Jerusalem. That unit's spent. And in Basra we'll move up to Baghdad, same thing, rolled a 6, fantastic. So that unit also comes up and is spent. Okay, so we have a little bit of a buffer across the two, sort of the African theatre and then the Middle Eastern theatre, to stop the, I keep wanting to say the Axis, but it's the Central Powers, from damaging our supply lines effectively. Okay, so that's good. Now we were thinking now about, what were we thinking? Good question. We were thinking about what to do with our production points. Okay, well, starting from the weakest nation in terms of production value, which will be France, they only have 3. Take those, that's 5, and we will add on 2 fresh units for 4 total and 1 spent unit. So let's do that. Oh, except of course we can't, because we only have a limited finite number of units, and that finite number of units that we have remaining is 2, because we have already removed some. So they will come on, they will go and sit in Paris. We don't have anything else to spend that remaining point on, because it's the British fleet. We don't have any spent French units, they all got removed. There's really nothing else to spend it on right now, so we could try to transfer production, but we would need a clear supply line across land, which we don't really have. We can go through one neutral country, but that's not doable either, because the only country we can currently send production to is Russia. So yeah, so that final production point is actually wasted, which feels a bit pants, but there you go, it is what it is. Now, for the Brits though, we have baseline 7, modified by whatever the result of that is. So let's do that. So that's 2 dice for the 1 unit we have fresh in the submarine box. I've lost my dice. There we go. And that is a 4. And a 4 is a success if the convoys are not active. So we don't have convoys, so that is a success. So the Brits lose a production point there. So we're down to 6 production points. Now we do want to spend 1 here to refit that unit. So we're down to 5. I want to bring on a fresh unit. I'll put it in the British Isles, which brings that to 3. I'll flip that, and that'll bring it down to 2. I won't worry about the Middle East just yet. We've got 2 points remaining. I could transfer them to France, and I think that is what I'll do, because I'm expecting there to be some damaged units next turn. There will probably almost certainly be another attack by Germany next turn. Okay, let's pop those 2 there for France. Moving on to the Eastern Allies. No, we're not. We're taking a tech card, and here we have the Q ships, which is the level 1 U-boat card. So that will just sit there as well, and that will impact the attack and attrition tables when we make that rolls during the production phases. Nothing else to do. We don't have any air superiority, so we'll just flip that artillery counter back over for free and move on to the Eastern Allies. Okay, and the Eastern Allies event card is really a bit rubbish in this circumstance, because it gives the first attack by a Serbian army a +2 DRM, but Serbia are effectively out of the game, so that card just gets put to one side. That is kind of rubbish. So what do we do? Well, I reckon it would make sense to try and conquer the German industrial regions. We are going to have to go through Poland, I think, in order to do that. So let's start with an attack on Poland. But first we do have to move. I'm not going to move anybody on this track, although I could in theory move him there, but I won't. I'll just move this one down to the Posen region. Okay, so we'll start our attack by attacking into Poland, which is here, and I'll just do a 1-on-1 attack to start with to see how we get on. Could use the artillery, but I'm going to save that. So the 6 for the Russians and a 4 for the Austro-Hungarians. So that is a spent counter there. And I'll do the same thing again into the same region and from the same region, so we would have the big push marker, which I'm hoping you can see. I haven't checked the view screen for a while. Yeah, we can see that. Cool. And that's a 5 plus 1 is a 6 for the Russians and a 1 again for the Austro-Hungarians. They are forced to retreat. Now, a quirky thing with the Austro-Hungarians, unless you are absolutely forced to, you cannot go into German territory. So the Central Allies cannot go into German home territory during a game unless there is absolutely no other option for them to do so when there's a retreat. So even though we could potentially, in theory it'd be lovely to retreat back into that area there, we have to go here into Austro-Hungarian territory. The unit that attacked moves forward, and then this unit here comes forward as well. And I've just realised that that artillery probably can't move forward in this point because they move separately as their own unit, not as part of an attack, not at the base level anyway. Okay, but anyway, we've attacked and we've succeeded in conquering Poland, or reconquering Poland. Attacking into Germany then, and we'll start by attacking from Prussia into here. I'm not doing that because I want to clear the trenches, and the trenches will reset when I move to a new area that I attack from. So let's do that. Let's attack from here into here. The first attack being against the trenches. It's a 5 for the Russians and a 6 for the Germans. So we have a spent unit there. Do it one more time. A 3 for the Russians and a 3 for the trench, meaning it's breached, and we can now use that same Russian unit without making it spent, but without gaining a marker for the big push benefit on the first German unit. That's a 2, and we have a 5 for the Germans. So that's not going to be now worth the effort, I don't think, to carry on our attack there. So what should we do instead? Good question. Good question. Is it worth attacking into Austro-Hungarian Empire? I think it probably is, to try to limit the amount of attacking they are now going to do on Russia. So let's do that first from the Ukraine into Galicia. We have a 2 on the Ukraine, that's pretty poor, and a 4 plus 1 for the mountains in Galicia, meaning they are spent. Now the Russians only have 4 points of production at this point. They may get more later, but at this point they only have 4 points of production, and we currently have nothing. Well, we currently do not have enough to cover our units in need of a refit, so we'll stop attacking there and we'll move straight into production, starting with the weakest country, which would have been Serbia, but they're conquered. They don't get any production, meaning we just go straight to Russia, and they would spend 2 to refit, 3 to refit, and then the 4th one here to refit. Okay, I'm doing that one instead of this one so that I can use that as a defence if I need to against the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Right, that's it. Nothing else to do for the Eastern Allies. And we jump now to the Central Allies for the last faction's turn of this round or this year. And the event card is the Balkan Veterans, which is a +1 to all defending Serbian armies. Again, pretty useless because the Serbians are out of the game, effectively. And we can't actually attack into what is currently neutral Romania, where they're hiding out. So that's kind of not super helpful at this point. But what we do have is the ability now to move 2 units up into the front up in the north, which I'll move this one here, and this one. I'll keep a unit in Serbia and a unit here, just in case anyone tries to sneak down the back through Greece sometime in the next few turns. Okay, so first thing we'll do is we will try to ease the stranglehold or ease the assault on Germany by attacking into Russia. Okay, so I think what we'll do is we will attack here into Brest-Litovsk in the hope of possibly trying to cut off some retreat. Maybe. No, let's do Poland because they will be able to defend. Okay. But then if I do attack there and they do defend, at least I will have removed the ability of that cannon to attack on the next turn. So it's subtle things like that that you have to think about when you're playing this game. Okay, so let's do the attack into Brest-Litovsk then from Galicia. So the first counter is straightforward, and that's a 3 for the Hungarians and a 5 for the Russians. That's a loss then for the Hungarians. I'll try again, but I'll use this artillery. And we've got a 5, and then the Russians will benefit from the counter battery card to roll 2 dice as well, and they've rolled a 5, meaning they have lost, but at least they've held their ground somewhat. And so, do I do a final attack from Hungary, from Galicia, Austro-Hungarian Empire region, up into Brest-Litovsk? That's a good question. Because they're only, again, production's limited. Production's a real problem in this game. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 units without any production, but we only have, without any, that need refitting, but we only have 3 production points. I'm losing track of what I'm saying here right now. There's quite a lot to think about, even in a relatively simple game. Okay, so let me pause the combat there, think about what we're going to do down here in Turkey. I think what we'll do, I did say we can always move 1 Turkish unit. So even though we move 2 units here, we can still move a Turkish unit. Now really I should have done that when the other movement happens, so I won't do it now. But suffice to say, we could have moved the additional Turkish unit if I'd wanted to. But really, nothing much to do down in Turkey at this point. So we won't do anything down there just yet. Okay, what's left? Just moving to production. The Turkish have 1 production point here, and I will flip the unit in Anatolia. As I said a minute ago, the Austro-Hungarian Empire have 3, and I'll just flip the 3 units there in Galicia and leave those guys there resting in Bosnia. Okay, so nothing else to do on the Central Allies phase. With the Allies, there's no technology or anything like that, or U-boats or anything like that to worry about. So we just flip the fired unit back over and we move on to the next turn, which is going to be spring of 1915. In that turn, there will be trenches available for the first time. So I'll do another video for spring of 1915, and hopefully you'll see how the game starts to develop as we move through and get more technology, more things available to us. Okay, so I'll end the video there. Cheers for watching, and see you for spring of 1915. And the lamps are going out.